Hi, my name is Andrea Orama, and I am an undergraduate software engineer major at the University of Puerto Rico, Mayagüez. I am presenting my work on our study of journalists versus algorithms, readers' perception of credibility, with a focus on the relationship between news consumption habits, the ability to determine source, and credibility assessment. I'd like to thank my team members, Rachel and Matthew, and my research mentors, Dr. Amina Kothari, Dr. Cecilia Alm, and Dr. Reynold Bailey for assisting me in the study. So what is the motivation for our study? New trained language models have the ability to generate human-like text at incredible speeds, and this brings questions about the potential misuse of these technologies because they could be used to potentially spread misinformation very quickly. We're building on the 2020 Tawari study that used GPT-2 as their language model to run similar tests, and they found that human-written stories were correctly identified 70% of the time, while GPT-2 generated stories were misidentified as written by human 50% of the time, and they did not find any relationship between credibility and eye gaze or facial expressions. We're also building on the GRAVE study of 2018 that developed a measure of perception of content that was reliable using 3 dependent constructs: credibility, readability, and journalistic expertise. Our study used the new GPT-3 language model, and in our sample size, we included 15 English-speaking participants and 15 Spanish-speaking participants for a total number of 30 participants. We examined their perception of information credibility based on whether the articles were or were perceived to be written by humans or generated by AI, how language affected these scores, and whether or not there is a relationship between eye gaze or facial expressions and their perceived credibility. We also asked participants for information about their preferred mediums of news consumption and how frequently they consume news. GPT-3 is what we use to generate our AI content. It stands for Generatively Pre-trained Transformer 3 and is a 175 billion parameter language model, which means it has been trained on more text than any human will read in their lifetime, giving it the ability to perform natural language tasks at near human level. On the right is an example of how we prompted GPT-3 with a few sentences from a real news article. This method generated the best quality articles. Our experiment begins with pre-calibration slides to ensure good eye tracking data. This is followed by a demographic questionnaire. Next, participants go through 3 tasks that are repeated in order 8 times. The first task is a palate cleanser to make sure participants start reading the articles with neutral emotions. The second task is an article that can either be human written or machine generated. And the third task is a post-story survey where participants answer questions about credibility and the source of the article. After they have repeated those tasks, they fill out a final questionnaire about their news consumption habits and skills with technology. The experiment finishes with post-calibration sites to adjust eye tracking data if the participant moved during the study. These are examples of 2 of the English articles used in our study. Originally, we wanted to conduct the study with articles on the topic of COVID-19 because it is very current and everyone knows about it. But GPT-3 was only trained on text datasets up to 2019. Therefore, when trying to generate text about the topic, it was very unsuccessful. So we decided to change the topic to Ebola, because it is a similar topic to COVID-19. Here are two examples of Spanish articles used in the study. For our study, we have three main research questions, but I will be focusing on the third. Do the reader's news consumption preferences influence their ability to identify articles written by human or AI generated? And does it affect their perception of information credibility? To answer these questions, we ask readers two key questions. The first question being, how often do you read, listen to, or watch the news? And gave them 5 answers to choose from. Out of the 30 participants, 10 answered frequently throughout the day, 5 answered every day, 9 answered a few times a week, and 6 said occasionally. No participants answered never. The chart on the right shows the average of respondents that correctly identified the source, whether human or AI. It is clear that readers that consume more news were able to correctly identify the source more times. And as readers consumed less news, the amount of times they were able to correctly identify source was less. The second question was, where do you primarily get your news from? To which readers had 5 answers to select from. As you can see in the left chart, 15 answered social media, 2 answered television, 10 answered news apps, and 3 answered newspapers. No participants said radio. On the chart in the right, we can see the average of respondents that correctly identified the source, whether human or AI. Participants with the highest average, and therefore the ones that correctly identified the source more times, were those that read newspapers. Following came those that read news apps, and after, without too much significant difference, those who get their news from social media. The lowest average came from those participants that get their news from television. Our study provides new information on the relationship between readers' ability to identify AI-generated content and how they consume their news. The tendencies clearly show that people who regularly consume news can better identify AI-generated content and are less likely to be misled by it. Our study also shows that people who watch their news versus those who read it have a harder time identifying AI-generated content. Continuing with our study, we will further analyze if this relationship extends to how the readers perceived credibility. Additionally, we will break down the results by language to see if there are significant differences. For future works, a larger sample size of subjects would be very beneficial. This could help us further understand some of the tendencies we have observed. Also, including more open-ended questions where participants can explain why they are answering the way they are would give us more insight on what the readers are thinking and can better explain our observations. In the future, the study could also benefit from asking about the readers' perspectives on AI being used as a tool for journalists to use. Finally, I would like to see more work on GPT-3 on different languages. Thank you for listening.